Hi, and welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast for athletes, coaches, and professionals who want to achieve their goals faster. I'm David Charlton, and I'll be sharing proven methods from leading athletes, coaches, and experts that will help you get the most from your talent. Today's show is sponsored by Functional Intelligent Training, who are a sports injury clinic located in Gosforth near Newcastle upon Tyne and specialise in athlete development, nurturing future champions, strength and conditioning support and excellent rehabilitation services. An important element of mental toughness, which I haven't really touched on so far on the podcast, is called interpersonal confidence. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to a leading speaker who's written a book on the topic. Let's be honest, when we're communicating with different people, be it in family life, in the workplace, in sport, certainly in team sports, it can be quite difficult at times. If you come across people who are in a different wavelength to you, perhaps you get some people whose ego gets in the way, they can be quite critical of you. Then if you throw in social media and the trolls, perhaps being criticised unfairly from different people who aren't actually qualified to criticise you, being able to deal with these different types of situations is a skill which actually can be developed. So in this episode, I'm going to be having a fascinating conversation with my guest, who's going to share some really helpful ideas and advice to be able to help you look in the mirror and adapt your approach to communicating with people. Enjoy. Today I've got a very special guest called Paul McGee, and we're going to be talking a lot about interpersonal confidence and dealing with conflict in different situations. Would you be able to just explain to the listeners a little bit about your background and what you're up to now, Paul?
Yeah, hi, David. It's great to be with you. Background is a bit bizarre to most people because often, as I say to people, my background's in beef burgers. It's also in behavioural and social psychology. But once I graduated back in the 1980s, probably before most people were born, I worked with as a Unilever graduate management trainee, and they placed me with one of their companies, Birdseye Walls, specialised in HR. And one of the privileges I had of working with Birdseye Walls is I got to manage the 30 women on the economy beef burger line. Two main lessons from that experience. Don't eat economy beef burgers. I know what goes in them. And secondly, I learned that when arrogance meets ignorance, that's a dangerous cocktail. And I think I was a bit of both. My degree prepared me for a graduation, but it didn't prepare me for managing 30 women. Or probably 30 men if that had been the case, but it was 30 women. I suppose, life-changing event for me, David, was a year after I started working with Unilever. I lost my job through ill health, nothing to do with the beef burgers, so lay off the lawyers, Birdseye. And I became ill with an illness, ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, yuppie flu, or chronic fatigue syndrome. Was ill for over 3 years. At that point, I was on invalidity benefit. At times, my wife had to wash me because I wasn't well enough to wash myself. I had a walking stick when I felt well enough to walk. But over time, although I would improve and relapse, got to a point where I thought, you know what? Maybe I could get a little job just working part-time. And I kissed a lot of my dreams goodbye. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a job doing anything because I couldn't pass a medical. So March 1991, signed off invalidity benefit, and I hired myself. Amazing at the interview. I passed my own medical. And yet since then, I've written a few books. I've written 12 in total. 11 were adult books. When I say adult books, calm down, not 50 Shades of Grey variety, but books for adults. And the 12th one is called Yes, the Sumo Secrets of Being a Positive, Confident Teenager, which I'm super excited about. Worked with over 1,000 organisations, spoken in 41 countries, and I work with the 3 Ps, public sector, private sector, and I work with a few Premier League football teams, predominantly Manchester City, but last year, actually, Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club brought me in to do a virtual session around well-being and mental health with both their players and their staff as well. Why am I known as Sumo Guy? SUMO is an acronym. It can stand for Shut Up, Move On, or Stop, understand, move on. And the book that came out in 2005 called Sumo went on to be a Sunday Times bestseller. For my sins, I combine comedy with my love of football and support Wigan Athletic and Bradford City. It's a long story, David. It's a long story. So that's me in a nutshell.
Right. Fascinating stuff. With regards to you setting yourself up as self-employed there and working alone, how do you feel the importance of your mindset has been in that regards?
Well, massively important, because in the first year, I actually won a contract, but on a self-employed basis, to work with a training organisation called Dale Carnegie. And, he wrote the book in the 1930s, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And in my first year of business, I turned over £2,300, paid no tax, no national insurance, and my accountant sacked me. Now, why is it 30 years later I'm having this conversation with you? Because maybe it wasn't just, all right, so it wasn't a great first year of launch, but I developed a hunger around personal development. I became, Zig Ziglar talked about your car can become a university on wheels. And I would just consume so much personal development. And although things didn't work out with Dale Carnegie, I think what was working out was getting a hold of my mindset and how to manage my mindset, overcome setbacks. And, what was an appalling start to my career, really, in business. I mean, I can make excuses. Britain was officially in recession in 1991. Loads of people weren't investing in training. I was very naive. I was passionate, enthusiastic, but I didn't have a lot of business nous. But, I stuck with it, persevered, started to learn ideas that helped me, started to share them with other people, started to write books, and then start to get opportunities to speak at other events. And I would definitely say it was evolution rather than revolution. But at the cornerstone of everything that I've achieved, it's all to do with what's happened between my ears. I've got this phrase or this question: besides God, if you believe in God, who's the most important person you're ever going to talk to? It's yourself. So mindset matters massively.
Yeah, because it's very easy to talk yourself out of doing things and take absolutely no action at times.
100%, 100%. In fact, if I share a story with that, and it'll be maybe later on I might refer to it, but I saw, this was back in about 1994, I saw an advert in a magazine, I think it was a personnel management magazine, and it was an organization based in the US who were looking for speakers to present their seminars in the UK. So it didn't matter about your nationality, but they wanted you to be based in the UK. And I remember on the application, I was looking at, thinking I could do this. It was about having energy, a love of personal development, doing stuff on customer service, leadership. And then it said, method of application. Remember, this is in 1994. Please apply by sending in a 1-hour video of yourself speaking, ideally in front of 50 to 100 people. Well, one, I didn't have a 5-minute video, never mind a 1-hour one. It wasn't like I could get my iPhone out, because we were 13 years off even getting iPhones, and video myself doing something. And I normally spoke to groups of redundant coal miners. Maximum numbers was about 12 to 15. So I didn't have a video. I didn't speak in front of 50 to 100 people, and actually put the application form in the bin. But on my wall, I had this little phrase, carpe diem, seize the day. And I battled with myself about what I should do. I remember looking at the bin, looking at the wall, looking at the bin, looking at the wall, and thinking, could I go for it still? What, who dares wins? And in the end, I took the application form out. And I guess, I suppose what I started to do was change my mindset and think of a reason why I should apply rather than for a reason why I shouldn't. And there's absolutely no word of a lie. As I reread the application form, nothing had changed. It still said, please apply by speaking, with a video of you speaking ideally in front of 50 to 100 people. But there was a word I noticed second time I'd not noticed first time. And that was, please, send in a video of yourself speaking ideally in front of 50 to 100 people. And I can still vividly remember, I think I actually said it out loud. I actually said to myself, Paul, you don't live in an ideal world. I remember saying that to myself. So what did I do? I hired a room. I invited some friends and family. My mum was there and an uncle. My wife, Helen, filmed it. And I had about 10 people in the room, sent this video off to this company, did a piece to camera beforehand that just went, folks, this is not 50 to 100 people. It's a setup, if I'm perfectly honest, but I want to demonstrate what my abilities and skills are, because I ran this free 1 hour motivational session for this group of people. And sent the video off, and I became the second youngest speaker they'd ever used in the world to present their seminars. And that was all down to a conversation I had with myself. And do you know what? Years later, David, I was speaking at a conference and I was telling that story. And this guy came up to me at the end. He said, who was the company, if you don't mind me asking, that was the advert? I said, it's a company called Career Track. I said, why do you ask? He said, I saw the same advert and I didn't have a video and I left my application in the bin.
Wow, powerful.
Indeed.
The power of self-talk in the mind, which when we're confronted with other people in different situations, that can be a huge thing as well. I would imagine in the workplace, different companies that you've worked with, be it in business, in sport, or even just in life, you'll have been confronted with people who don't necessarily want to change, and they can be quite frustrating to work with. What sort of advice would you give to individuals when they're faced with those type of people?
I don't think anybody, David, has ever woken up, or, let's start with that. No one wakes up in the morning going, how can I have a really bad day today? How can I mess it up for my manager, my leader, my family? I don't think people wake up like that. How can I be miserable and demotivated? We don't wake up like that. We're not born negative and cynical. We don't, start as a toddler, trying to learn to walk and then all of a sudden going, we fall down. We don't go, oh, I'm giving up with this walking lark. I'll stick to crawling. So in other words, we're not born negative and cynical. We're not born resistant to change. In fact, we're born curious and want to explore the world. And no one wants to really wake up and think, how can I have a really horrible day today? So I actually think rather than go, well, people are resistant to change and label them, what I think is important to managers and leaders is, in a sense, get curious, play detective, try and understand a little bit more about this person's world, because there are reasons why people are behaving the way they are. Maybe I am resistant to change because I want to avoid discomfort. Now, why do I want to avoid discomfort? Well, two reasons. Could be one, your attitude, and one could be to do with ability. So, for instance, maybe I'm just, I'm close to retirement. I can't be bothered. There's no consequences to me not changing. So why bother? It's an attitude issue. But sometimes, it could be an ability issue. I want to avoid discomfort because actually I'm not sure what to do. So it's like, right, team, who's going to do the presentation next week? Well, some people are going to go, I just want to, attitude. I can't be bothered, leave it to someone else. But someone's thinking, I'm not going to do it because I don't know how best to do a presentation. I'm not particularly skilled. I'm not very effective. And so actually, it's not an attitude issue. It's an ability issue. So maybe with some coaching and support, they could start to change whatever the context is. So you've got avoiding discomfort. I think another reason is people don't look stupid, so we fear failure. So again, we might need a bit of encouragement. I think for some people, it's just about complacency. They don't feel they really need to change. Let's be honest. What we've gone through globally in what will nearly be 12 months. Well, hang on a minute. Loads of people are flipping changed. Loads of people who resisted change for years, all of a sudden embrace change. There were doctors, for instance, because my son's a doctor and I work a lot with the NHS. But I've worked with parts of the NHS who've said, not for all doctors, but for some, for years, doctors wouldn't do telephone appointments. Not all doctors, but some wouldn't. Well, guess what? Loads of people started doing telephone appointments last March. So sometimes it's that sense of, well, do I really need to change? Maybe we get a little bit complacent set in our ways. But when you give people a big enough reason why they should change, you'll actually realize that actually we're not as negative and resistant to change as we think. Loads of people go, oh no, people hate change. Rubbish, right? Let's think about 2 years ago. What's happening in people's lives? They're going on holidays. They're changing their car. They're moving house. They're starting a family. They're buying a pet. They're, changing their relationships in their personal life. They're either acquiring a partner or changing a partner or whatever. So actually, if we've got a degree of control and we see a benefit to us, we actually quite like change. So I think what we've got to do as managers and leaders is, one, stop and understand what's the real reason why people aren't changing. Fear of failure, avoiding discomfort, complacency. And then try and tap into understanding what is it about that person that I can plug into so that they see a benefit to the change for them. And maybe also they have some control. Sometimes there ain't no clear benefit and they can't have a lot of control. But you know what? Somebody's got to say, look, this is how it's got to be. And so I think we all need to rethink the whole concept of change, because I don't think, as I say, that people are as negative as you think. There's an underlying reason, what's below the iceberg, as to why they are resisting change. Find that out and you can often turn people around.
Yeah, earlier on there, you mentioned about labels there, and it's very easy to, I suppose, be lazy in some respects and just label a person, like say, who doesn't want to change. And then I suppose another pattern is in the workplace, especially with high achievers anyway, they can get busy, and they just don't value spending some time and having a conversation with someone and getting to know what's actually going on.
Totally. I think some people are very much on command and control in the way that they lead and manage people. And sometimes we just need to, it's about developing relationships, isn't it? It's about engaging with people. It's being prepared to listen to them. And some people say, well, I haven't got time. Well, find someone in your leadership team who has, because it's a cliche, but it's still true. Your biggest asset is your people. And we need to maximize it. And you think about in sport, certain players who go and play with one manager, perhaps, and they just don't get the best from them. Then they move to another club and then they do. And it's like, what's that about? It's the same player, but they're managed differently. It's like sports teams. It amazes me. Millions upon millions and millions is spent on buying talent, and then millions is spent on keeping that talent through wages. And yet sometimes managers and leaders don't really know how to maximize their talent and get the best from them. So what is often derided as like the soft skills, i.e. the people skills, the emotionally intelligent, that is the toughest part of any person's job. It's the people. And that isn't always easy.
So in effect, being able to empathize with people and just get to know their understanding, their sort of why they do things is so vitally important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes it's about simple questions like, what brings you most satisfaction from what you're doing in work? What brings you satisfaction? Sometimes people will go, well, I love the detail. I feel like I'm making a difference. I love the opportunity to express myself, or whatever it might well be. And then you're saying to people, describe a time when you felt really motivated at work. Get them to relive it, to retell. And I can look back at before I became ill and certain projects I've been involved in when I've been running my own business. And you think, if you'd just said things this way, or if you'd asked me that, you could have got so much more from me. But the command and control, not trying to understand where I was coming from, you're wasted. We waste talent. We waste people's ability. And it's not, I appreciate not everyone's as emotionally intelligent as other people, but we can all learn to ask a few questions and give people a good listening to. And some people go, I've got time. Look, seriously, if you were just to give someone 5 minutes uninterrupted, what I'd call deep listening. So no emails, no phone distraction, no agenda from you other than to understand them a bit more, where they're coming from. 5 minutes, it's staggering what you'd find in 5 minutes from somebody. Now if you can give them 10, even better. But, sometimes it's that investment. I've got this phrase in one of my books, no investment, no return. What you invest in people, you can get a return from people. But what we often want is want to get a return, but without the investment.
That makes an awful lot of sense. And I suppose what can be pushed to one side there is people's strengths, where they're just not really considered whatsoever. And if there's just such a big focus on, I suppose, on the doing and on the potentially their weaknesses as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, if you talk to someone, have a conversation about what they're good at, even that conversation can just make people feel a little bit better.
Well, even if you're thinking about, like, in the workplace, you think about, well, how was your weekend? What do you get up to? Oh, well, I was coaching the local soccer team, or I'm doing a painting class, or, there's so many different things that people can start to tell you. And you think, I never knew about that. I never realized that about you. I've used this phrase, there's more to you than meets the eye. There's more to people than meets the eye. We've all got a story. And I think sometimes we pigeonhole people. We think we know the reasons why they behave the way they do. Very often we don't. So I think one of the greatest tools in any leader's toolkit, and there are many that you will need, but it's not just about listening, it's asking good questions, and it's listening to learn rather than listening just to reply.
That's fantastic advice, that is. If we flip it now in terms of, if you're a person in the workplace, or perhaps a young aspiring athlete, and you've got a coach or a manager who's in charge of you, who you're intimidated by, and you've put off actually having a conversation with them, what advice would you give them in order to be able to improve that relationship?
I think one of the things to think about is, that intimidation. I mean, I appreciate some people go out of their way to intimidate you, and that's not easy. But at the end of the day, it's reminding ourselves that we are all human, that we all have this limited amount of time on this planet, that whatever your job title is, whatever you've previously achieved, you still need to go to the toilet, you still need to, hydrate, you still need to eat. You will still have all our flaws and our failings. It's just that some are good at hiding it more than others. And I so understand, first of all, that if you feel intimidated, that's because of how you've interpreted behavior and their position in your own head. So first of all, you can work on your own mindset, I think. And secondly, I think maybe it's not a question of going out to impress everybody all the time, but it's about things like, if you get a chance to talk to someone, this is not a chance for you to impress them with, let me tell you all about me. But most people, David, let's be honest, as I'm doing now, most people quite like to talk a bit about themselves when it's appropriate, and if we've got the time to do so. So even just asking, boss, how long have you been in management? What was your first job like? Showing some interest in other people can be helpful when it's appropriate. You've got to think about the time and the context clearly. But that's a way of finding out, what would you say, boss? Would you say the 3 main lessons you've learned from being a manager or a leader? What would they be? And it's like, show some interest in them. Not you just think, I've got to impress you. Well, show some interest rather than think you've got to impress. So I think that can play a part. And also, ultimately, I think actions do speak louder than words. And so it's like I was listening to a podcast with Kasper Schmeichel, the Leicester City goalkeeper. And he says, what's really interesting, he says, every Leicester manager who's come into the club has dropped a player who they got on a free transfer from Aston Villa called Marcus Albrighton. Now, what's interesting about Marcus is he just keeps on working hard, showing up, working hard, showing up. And every manager who's been at the club whilst Marcus Albrighton's been at the club has eventually brought him back into the team. And so I think sometimes it's not just about what you say, it's about what you do. But if you are going to say something, treat this person as a human rather than as a title. And if you think you can ask them a question, if it's appropriate, to learn more about them, you'll often find people actually like talking a bit about themselves.
I like that. And that again all starts with what you mentioned there about interpretation and the little voice on your shoulder.
Absolutely. I got years ago, I was asked to be an MC stroke compere at a charity event. And the speakers that night included David Cameron and Theresa May. And I had to introduce them. Now, we're talking a few years ago. Labour was still in power. So it was, it was one would have been pre-2015. And but I am, speaking. I'm with the leader of the Conservative Party, David Cameron, and I didn't realise at the time, but the two future prime ministers. And at one stage, before the event started, and I'm chatting to them, I'm like feeling a little bit out of my depth here. And there were various other politicians there, and government officials and leaders of commerce. Do you know what, David? I went to the toilet and I didn't need to go to the toilet. And I just went to the toilet, just have a conversation with myself and go, okay, this is a great opportunity. Remember the privilege of pressure. Remember they're only human. And just in a sense, get a bit of a grip, mate. Get a bit of a grip. And I had to give myself a good talking to. So, and that helped. I introduced them. I started having a bit of a banter with them. I remember Ian Duncan Smith was there as well. He gets chatting to me. And then I thought, you know what? We're all human and we've all got our vulnerabilities. So let's just recognise that rather than keep putting people on a pedestal and elevating them too much in our own mind to the point where we feel intimidated by their presence.
So on that theme then, if... thinking about the whole use of social media and the media right now, and as we know, a lot of the people that might be listening might well be athletes. Consider you're in that position there where you're introducing David Cameron and Theresa May, and you mess it all up. You have a terrible performance in some people's eyes, and you get a whole lot of trolls on social media. How are you going to deal with that?
Okay, I mean, and those, it wasn't messed up, but life, sometimes we will mess up, and I get that. If you're in sport, you might have a bad day. A certain footballer once said to me, and it's worth, again, it comes down to mindset, he said to me, as I was talking about the inner critic with him, imagine him with this big red boxing glove, he beat himself up. And he said, you know what, if I have a bad game, I will beat myself up for a couple of hours. But then I say to myself, just because you had a bad game doesn't make you a bad player. And I think sometimes we need to acknowledge that we might have had a bad game, or we might have had a bad day or a bad performance, but that doesn't mean you are therefore bad. It's like, as a parent, I might sometimes in the past have said something to my kids and then regretted it. Doesn't mean I'm a bad parent, just means maybe I had a bad day or a bad 5 minutes. So first of all, get a little bit of perspective. And I would say, try and have a conversation with your inner coach rather than your inner critic. Secondly, I think we sometimes we just need to acknowledge that we can get a bit super defensive when we're being criticised. What we've got to say to ourselves is, okay, whose voice are we listening to? Because if you've got a coach, I'm thinking particularly in a sporting context, and they challenge you, then maybe their voice is worth listening to. So I'm not going to say to you, don't take it personal, just ignore it. No. If your coach is saying, come on, there were certain things that didn't go so well today, be prepared to listen. But if it's Dave, the car mechanic from Dudley, tweeting about you and about your performance, well, hang on a minute. You want to get better. Would you be approaching this random stranger on social media, Dave from Dudley, about how to improve? Would you be seeking advice from this person? And if the answer is no, then ask yourself this: why would I take criticism and believe criticism from somebody I'd never take advice from? Why would I take criticism from someone I wouldn't take advice from? So think about that for a start and think, well, I won't go to advice from them, so why am I taking criticism from them? But if I'm being challenged by my coach, by a confidant who knows me well and who has my best interests at heart, then maybe I do need to listen to that. But sometimes you just got to go easy on the boxing glove and go, you know what? Okay, it was just a bad day. Of course, it's also worth thinking, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death, where is it? Steve Peters, who wrote the book, The Chimp Paradox, talked about what Chris Hoy talks about his relationship with Steve Peters, who was used by the British Olympic Association, the cycling team. And one of the things that Chris Hoy said about his conversation with Steve Peters is Steve Peters said, let's just get this all in perspective, Chris. You're riding a bike around in circles. That's it. You're not performing life-changing, life-saving operation on somebody's brain. You're on a bike going round and round. So let's get that into perspective to begin with. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death, where is it? How important it'll be in 6 months' time? I can tell you this now. Theresa May and David Cameron and Ian Duncan Smith aren't going to remember the day they met Paul McGee all those years ago. So let's also get a few other things in perspective. But also, if you have screwed up or someone's challenged you, okay, what can I learn from this? Is there anything to learn? And what would I do differently next time? So I think what happens sometimes is, so it's very easy for me to say, well, ignore the trolls. Well, ignore anybody whose advice you wouldn't go to. But secondly, if you are being challenged and, in inverted commas, criticised, maybe there is a seed of truth in that criticism that we can learn from. So be prepared to learn from it.
Seek to reflect and learn from the situation. Yeah, it's vital, and otherwise you're going to keep repeating the same mistakes time and time again. So as we're approaching the end there, who would you say has been the biggest influence on your career, and why?
There's, I guess on one level, if I go back to my childhood, which was very, very challenging, but my mum was always an encourager. She's always got this phrase, the world is your oyster, which, to be fair, as a 6-year-old kid, I probably didn't understand, but there was that sense in which she was an encourager. I think I had, interestingly enough, I talked about that story earlier on that I had this application form, it was in the bin, but I'm looking at this phrase, Carpe Diem, seize the day. And in the end, I applied. The reason that I got that break and was the second youngest person ever used in the world by that organization was because of a lady called Jacqueline Guthrie. And she had the courage, you could say, to take me on and to hire me to work on behalf of that organization, presenting their seminars. And I always remember the first seminar I did was in Bolton. And it was deliberately, they called it your debut seminar. You were making your debut, but they deliberately chose that one because that location rather than, say, central London, because she said, we're doing an event in Manchester, we're doing one in Liverpool, but we're doing one in Bolton. So there won't be as high a number of people turning up. So we want to expose you and see what you're like, but we don't want to throw you completely into the lion's den amongst a huge audience. So there's only about 40 people at the event. And Jacqueline sat there at the back of the room taking notes throughout the whole session. And what she said to me at the end, when everyone had gone, she spent a further 2 hours debriefing me on the whole day. And she said, today wasn't amazing. Today, there are a lot of things that we would want to change for the future. But then she said something. She said, you know what? I saw enough today for me to believe you could be one of our best speakers and presenters. And you know what? Words change worlds. And she gave me enough hope and self-belief that day, although it was a seed of self-belief that I needed to water. But she gave me that seed of self-belief. She planted something in me. Words change worlds. And the next opportunity I got was to do something in the summer with that organization because they plan their events well in advance. And that was happening in January. And in the summer, I'm doing my own, what they called tour. And all of a sudden, I am speaking in Liverpool. I am speaking in Manchester. I am speaking in London. And she gave me an opportunity. She gave me a breakthrough, that I achieved because of the opportunity. There would be one other person, which is a mate of mine, and he is a mate, but he's a mentor, a guy called Paul Sandham, who has been a confidant, he's been a coach, he's been a challenger, and sometimes a cheerleader. And we always think it's great to have cheerleaders in your life, which it is. But actually, Paul's biggest input he's been my confidant. In other words, he's been a sounding board. He's listened to me. He's also been a coach. He's shown me ways to do things better. but he's also challenged me. And we sometimes like to surround ourselves with people who just tell us how wonderful we are. Well, Paul Sandham doesn't go around telling me how wonderful I am. He'll often challenge me, cheerlead me when I need it, but he'll often challenge me. And that has been invaluable over the 30 plus years that I've known him. So my mum, definitely. Jacqueline Guthrie, she gave me that opportunity. She gave me the breakthrough. Words change worlds. And Paul Sandham for being both a friend, but also a mentor.
So having a nice little blend of different people with different personalities in order to help push you forward has
absolutely, that's right, totally.
Brilliant. I really enjoyed this discussion, Paul.
Great. So have I. Good talking about it.
Yeah, and that's been really good. What I'd like to do now is just ask you the question about, for the listeners' benefit, what would you think are the 3 takeaways from our chat that they can take home?
I think it is the first one is just recognizing that besides God, if you believe in God, the most important person you're ever actually going to talk to is yourself. We all create a story, a narrative in our mind. Well, how about making it a good story and an empowering story and being more mindful and aware of those kind of conversations and asking yourself the question, hang on a minute, who's in charge, the thinker or the thought? Well, it's the thinker. So you can influence your thoughts. So I'd say that's a big one. I think secondly, I'd actually just get people to recognize that we are all human. We're not machines. And even the person who intimidates you or impresses you the most still has their struggles, their self-doubts, their stories, and recognize that. It's just that some people are better at hiding it than others. So recognize we've all got our struggles and self-doubts at times. And perhaps the third one, I guess, maybe relates to your last question, is that mates matter massively. And we are never going to achieve what we want to achieve alone, whether it's someone giving you a break because they believed in you, like with me, Jacqueline, or because of my mate, Paul Sandham, who's been a lot of different things to me when I've needed it. We do not journey alone, and we need the support of others. And sometimes that's very direct support. It's one-to-one. It might be face-to-face, or in this world at the moment, virtual. But, sometimes you could get support from people who you never know and you never meet, but you learn from them through a podcast or through reading a book or watching a video on YouTube. So you don't do it alone.
3 fantastic gems there, Paul. Whereabouts can the listeners find more of this, more gems and more resources from you?
Well, if you're on social media, I often will tweet. So you can catch me on Twitter at the Sumo Guy. You can also connect with me via Instagram as well at the Sumo Guy. So at the Sumo Guy for both Twitter and Instagram. If you want to go to my website, you can go to thesumoguy.com. It's thesumoguy.com. And on there also, there's a link to my YouTube channel. Won't give you that title, it takes too long, but you can also check out some of my videos on my YouTube channel, and you can get those via my website. So I think those are 3 good places. And if you're really diligent, you'll track me down on Facebook and LinkedIn as well.
That's brilliant. All of the links that you've mentioned there, I'll make sure they're in the show notes for people
brilliant. Thanks, David.
To find you. And I really appreciate your time today. Thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure. I hope there's some value in what I've been saying.
Well, I would say so, without doubt.
Great stuff.
So I hope you found this episode really useful. It's such an interesting talking point and interesting area. And really, between Paul and I, we just touched on a really small element of that. I'd love to hear from you. So please do connect with me on Instagram at Mental Toughness Matters, or you can find me on LinkedIn too. If you just search my name, David Charlton. I'd love to know what you thought of this episode. So please do reach out and drop me a message. I'd like to give a big thanks to today's sponsors, Functional Intelligent Training, who are a sports injury clinic located in Gosforth, near Newcastle upon Tyne, and specialise in athlete development, nurturing future champions, strength and conditioning support, and excellent rehabilitation services. Thank you for listening to Demystifying Mental Toughness today. To sign up for tips and advice to help you be the best that you can be, go to www.sport-excellence.co.uk and sign up to the Mental Edge newsletter.